Okay, we will get started. So before we start the session, we will offer prayers. Om Ajnanathmirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmalitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Pada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagar Jatam Sagagana Raghunath Anvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sagitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagagana Lalita Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya
Just keep it until you can hear it. So.
Swami Nitinamine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarane Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuਭ്യവച Patidanam Pavane Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gauratve Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Welcome to our week.
Are you crying? I was serious, that's why. It was like nothing.
Welcome to our weekly study of Bhagavad Gita, systematic study of Bhagavad Gita. So today is session 3. So today's session topic is God, Ishvara, is one or many, and it's a very interesting topic. Before we jump on to today's topic, I would again appreciate all of you for taking your time and joining this systematic study of Bhagavad Gita. So I actually, one thing I can tell for sure is that if you dedicate the time, if you invest this time of studying this systematically, there will be a paradigm shift, there will be a broader outlook. You will be able to understand different religious processes, different types of religions, and different aspects of spirituality, which are with a lot more broader mind of view. So I again thank you for taking the time and studying this systematically. And this is the need of the hour, especially in the current scenario of uncertainty people are going through in various ways. So Bhagavad Gita will help us to transcend all the material problems and then understand who really are, what the purpose of life is. So before we jump into today's topic, I would like to do a recap on what we covered for past 2 weeks in few minutes. So all this, whatever discussions, whatever study we are doing, it's all based on the teachings of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of International Society for Krishna Consciousness, also known as Hare Krishna Movement. So his contribution to the world is translating this Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the essence and cream of the Vedic literature, from Sanskrit into English, which anybody can read and understand. So we are very grateful to his hard work. So on session 1, the topic we covered is the importance of human life. And we saw that there are 4 things common to all species of life. Ahara nadra bhayamaitanam cha samanyam etat pashubir samanam. Ahara means eating, nidra means sleeping, bhayam means fear. Out of fear we defend. Defending, maitunam means producing offsprings, mating. Eating, mating, sleeping, and defending are the 4 things common to all species of life. Pashubir samanam. Agara nidra bhayamaitanam cha samanyam etat. Samanya means equal. Samanyam etat pashubir samanam. This is common to both Pashu and Nara. Dharme hitesham adhike vishesho. The ability to discriminate between right and wrong. Ability to discriminate between good and bad. Ability to discriminate between suffering and happiness. The ability to understand, what is dharma, who am I. This ability to discriminate is the one which differentiates human beings from other species of life. Dharme hitesham adhike vishesho. Adhike vishesho means that is the one thing which extra human beings possess. Dharme hihina pashubir shamanam. If one does not use that faculty, then he is equal to pashu only, equal to animal only. One has to use this faculty which is given to us, which is the special prerogative of human life. Only human beings have that. Even other animals has intelligence. Another animals has reasoning, but they don't have the discriminating ability. When we suffer, right, we try to do something to relieve the suffering. Above that, we ask one more question. Why am I suffering? Animals also suffering. They might also do something to relieve their suffering, but they don't ask the question, why am I suffering? If there's a dog going in the street, if we take a stone and hit at him, throw the stone at this dog. By the way, I'm not recommending you to do it. I'm just giving hypothetical. If you do that, the dog immediately will protect itself, either by running away, or if there is no place to run, it will attack you. But if you take a stone or throw at a human being, he will also protect himself, either by running away, or if he is bigger than you, he will come and slap you. But beyond that, either he will run away or whether he will come and beat up that person, he will ask above that one more question. I was going on my own way. Why did he hit the stone at me? That ability to ask why is something unique, right? Ability to discriminate, ability to make choices, the ability to respond instead of reacting is the one which discriminates human beings, differentiate human beings from other species of life. Also, we saw that there are 4 problems which are real. Real problems means it has to be common to all. No one wants it and nobody can avoid it. We saw that there are 4 problems which meet this criteria. Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadi, Dukkha, Dosha, Anudarshanam. Right? Birth, old age, disease, and death. Right? Krishna tells in Bhagavad Gita, 13th chapter, one who understands birth, death, old age, and disease are the real cause of suffering in this world. He is situated in knowledge. Anudarshanam means situated in knowledge. On top of these 4 problems, we also saw that people are going through 3 categories of miseries. Adhyatmika klesha means miseries caused by our own body and mind. That is AA. In the slide I'm mentioning AA. Adi Bhaudika klesha, AB, means miseries caused by other living entities to us. Sometimes mosquitoes, sometimes viruses, sometimes bacteria, sometimes spouse, children, in-laws, whatever you want to fill it. Always other living entities causing some disturbance. Adi Bhaudika klesha. And then 3rd categories of miseries, Adi Daivika klesha. Miseries caused by natural calamities, natural forces, which is beyond our control, like a tsunami, like a thunderstorm, like extreme heat, forest fire, cold, right? Extreme heat, extreme cold. Like that, people have to go through always some type of suffering, So if we have to solve any problems, we instead of focusing on just temporary problems, which is based on eating, mating, sleeping, defending, the purpose of human life is to rise above the struggle for eating, mating, sleeping, defending, and solve the real problems. In this world, the solutions we are getting through various material means is all temporary. We saw that people try to solve these problems by sense gratification, by forgetting about all the real problems and then focusing on, okay, I will gratify my senses, I will live the way I want it, right? The second type of solution people try to seek is some kind of a self-help, oh, I am okay, you are okay, be positive, like that they try to do. I'm not saying that they don't help, but they don't give real complete solution to the real problems. And the 3rd category of help people choose is superficial religions, some yantra, mantra, some kind of horoscope, some kind of diet, some kind of something they do, But I'm not saying that they're all useless. They might give some relief, but they never give real relief from the real problems, So that is why one has to raise above the struggle for eating, mating, sleeping, defending, and ask the question, who am I? Who is God? What is this world? Why it is created? What is my connection to God? What is my duty towards my family, towards myself, to the world? What are the real duties of us? This kind of things, one has to ask. We are all searching for the right thing, happiness. But along with that, what comes? Misery. It is like buy one, get one free. Nobody wants misery in this world. Everybody is seeking happiness. But invariably, everybody is getting misery. Why is that? It looks like a design flaw in the world. If God had created this world, maybe he made a mistake. Why did he keep misery? Nobody wants misery. I want only happiness. We are not even defining what is happiness. We are all seeking for happiness. But invariably people get misery. Why is that? This is the purpose of life, is to rise above the struggle for eating, mating, sleeping, defending, and ask the question, why am I suffering? So that led to the second topic, how to solve the real problems. Is there any way to solve the real problems? We saw that Vedas gives that solution. Vedas, a privilege for the human society. That's what we saw in the second topic. In the second topic, various things we covered. What is Bhagavad Gita? What is its purpose? Why one should try to understand, how one should understand Bhagavad Gita. What is the subject matter of Bhagavad Gita, right? Who can understand Bhagavad Gita? From whom one should understand Bhagavad Gita? We saw that qualification of the disciple and qualification of the guru, and then 3 steps for perfection. The entire Vedas gives these 3 categories of knowledge, Sambandha Gyan. Who am I? Who is God? What is the relationship between me and God? That is called Sambandha Gyan. Second is called Abhideya Gyan. How to realize that relationship, right? I understand that I'm not this body, I'm spirit, soul, okay, and there is God, and what is the connection between God and soul? That Sambandha Gyan. How to realize that is called Abhideya. The process to realize that knowledge. The third category of knowledge is Prayojan. Means when we realize what is the ultimate thing we get, what is the ultimate experience we will get, the love of God. That's what the 3 categories of knowledge all the Vedas teach. The 3 steps for perfection we saw. And the 2 process of inquiry, Avaroga Pantha and Aroga Pantha. The ascending process of knowledge or inductive process, or the descending process of knowledge or deductive process. And we saw in general, when we use our senses, when we use our mind, we use the ascending process. For example, in science, how we get knowledge? We make some observation. Based on the observation, we come up with hypothesis. Based on the hypothesis, we conduct experiments to find out whether our hypothesis is correct or wrong, right or wrong. Based on the experimental data we collected, we conclude whether the hypothesis is right or wrong. If the hypothesis is wrong, we reject that it is not proper knowledge, it's not valid knowledge. If hypothesis is right, we accept that, oh, this is valid knowledge. Like that. An example I always give is a person who's tried to observe in this world. When he will see a bird, for example, he sees a crow in the street or in the tree. When he sees one crow which is black in color, right, that crow is in black, and this crow is in black in color. After seeing like 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 crows, he can come up with a hypothesis. Maybe all crows are black in color. Now we have to conduct experiment. This is a hypothesis. Maybe all crows are black in color. There is no way for me to see all the crows in this world. But to validate the hypothesis whether it's right or wrong, I need to conduct experiment and get some data. So maybe I can call somebody else in the other part of the Bangalore where I'm living. Then, do you have crows in your place? I can ask that person. Yes. What color it is? Black. And then I can call somebody in like Chennai. Do you have crows? Yes. What color? Black in color. I call somebody in Delhi. You have crows? Yes. What color? Black color. And then you call somebody in London. Do you have crows? Yes. What color? Black color. Like that, I can conduct experiment and collect evidence or collect data. Based on this evidence, I can come to a conclusion that maybe all crows are black in color is a valid hypothesis. It's a proven hypothesis. It is valid knowledge. All crows are black in color. Now, there is a problem with this approach. We saw that because we are always dependent on our senses to collect the data, we saw that our senses are all imperfect. We come under illusion, we commit mistakes, and to hide the mistakes, people cheat. With this 4 imperfection, when somebody is trying to validate the hypothesis, it will never be accurate because we can never see all the crows in the world. Somebody maybe in Antarctica saw a crow which is white in color. And then that person saw that you are the crow expert, you are the scientist who are doing research on the crows, and then he reach out to you and then see that, hey, I saw a crow which is white in color. Immediately we'll reject. No, that cannot be true. Observation error, data collection error, because I don't want to accept that I made a mistake. Then maybe another person from Africa calls you and says, hey, we have crow which is white in color. When different people starts reporting that crows are white in color, then immediately we put that theory that all crows are black in color as suspicious. It's not, we don't know, susceptible theory. And then we come up with new hypothesis. Maybe crows are black in color, black or white in color. Maybe black, maybe white. Then again we collect data, we collect hypothesis. Like that we go in ascending process, inductive process, through which we can never get perfect knowledge because we are dependent on the imperfect senses. So we saw that there are 3 ways of getting knowledge, Pratyaksha pramana, Anumana pramana, and Shabda pramana. Pratyaksha means, Aksha means eyes. Aksha means eyes. Pratyaksha means direct sense perception. Like eyes, through directly our senses, we see, we smell, we taste, we hear, we touch. Right? Through that we get knowledge. They are called Jnanendriyas, knowledge acquiring senses. Because it is imperfect, we can never get perfect knowledge. Anumana pramana means using this direct sense perceptions, right? Whatever the data we collected, whatever the knowledge we collected, our mind, the 6th sense, come up with hypothesis, speculates. Maybe it is like that, maybe it is like this. Maybe it is like this, or maybe it is like that. That mind comes up with an hypothesis. To prove whether the hypothesis is right and wrong, we have to conduct experiment. Again, to collect the data, we have to depend on the senses, which is imperfect. We come under illusion, commit mistake, and then cheat. So Pratyaksha and Anumana can never give perfect knowledge, especially on the topic of spirituality, especially on the topic of God and who am I and all these higher questions. Why do bad things happen to good people? And all of them can never be answered through Pratyaksha and Anumana. Hence, we have to depend on Shabda. Shabda pramana means testimony from an authority or inquiring from a perfect body of knowledge. When we make inquiry from a perfect body of knowledge, what we get is perfect knowledge. Our seeing might not be true. Our smelling may not be true. Our hearing may not be true. But when we inquire, make proper relevant inquiry when we make, then we can get proper knowledge or perfect knowledge. That is called Shabda Pramana. Is there any such a body of knowledge? We saw that Vedas or scriptures are such a body of knowledge. They are perfect body of knowledge. The test of authority is that it have never been proven wrong. It always withstood the test of time and it doesn't change over the period of time. If these 3 criteria is applicable, we can take something as perfect body of knowledge. We saw that Vedas are one of the perfect bodies of knowledge because it has never been proven wrong. It's always withstood the test of time. There is no Vedas 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. There is no revisions required. There is no based on economic, socio-political, situations. Based on that, people have to, make some kind of adjustments, nothing like that, So Vedas are perfect body of knowledge. If we have to understand who is God, who am I, all these higher questions, we have to make inquiry into Vedas through Shabda Pramana. We saw some examples of that, how Vedas have predictions of Lord Buddha's appearance. 5,000 years ago, Vedas have predicted that Buddha will appear in so and so place, so and so will be his father and mother, all this kind of things, information. Prediction of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, prediction of Ramanacharya, prediction of Madhvacharya, prediction of Shankaracharya, all the great acharyas predictions also given. And then, so many other predictions, prediction of Chanakya Pandita, prediction of Chandragupta Maurya, all of them are there, all this various information is predicted. There is a Purana called Bhavishya Purana. In that, actually, the prediction is given very nicely. And then we saw that scriptures are nothing but words of God. Scriptures does not belong to one sectarian group of people, or people belong to one race or one religion or one country. Scriptures means words of God. Any religion which is based on bona fide scriptures, they are all true religions. So we saw what is scriptures and what are Vedas. Vedas are ancient body of knowledge which is non-sectarian. For example, right? Vedas teaches two types of knowledge, knowledge of this world, knowledge beyond this world. Aparavidya and Paravidya. Paravidya means knowledge of spirituality, knowledge beyond our senses. Aparavidya means knowledge of this world. For example, Vedas teaches that body is changing. Okay, I might be Hindu, I might be a Muslim, I might be a Christian, I might be anybody, or even I might be atheist. Can anybody reject the fact that body is changing? No, doesn't matter who I am. Body is, this is true universally. Body is always changing. It gives fundamental universal truths. It does not belong to one category of people or one category of sectarian ideas. Vedas are universal. We saw that studying Vedas with an open mind will open alternate paradigm of knowledge. For a scientist, there are three things required. One should be open-minded for alternate paradigm of knowledge. One should be sincere in the pursuit of that knowledge. And based on the sincere inquiry and study, one should be honest in accepting the truth. It might even upset all my understanding so far, all my knowledge, whatever I understood so far might have been, be contradicting to what I found now. But I should be honest. If it is true, we should accept it. So these are the three qualities of a scientist. Similarly, these are the three qualities required for a transcendentalist or a spiritualist. One should be open-minded for alternate paradigm of knowledge. One should be sincere in the pursuit of that knowledge. One should be humble in accepting the conclusion of that pursuit. So that is the way to study the Vedas. So now today's topic we are jumping in. Session 3 is God. We saw that Bhagavad Gita predominantly gives 5 categories of knowledge, or 5 topics of knowledge. The first topic in Bhagavad Gita is Ishvara, God. Second topic is Jiva, the living entities. Third topic, the creation, material world, Prakriti. Fourth topic is Kala, the eternal time factor. And then fifth topic is Karma, the activities of the living entities in this world, the laws of nature, action and reaction. These are the 5 broad categories of knowledge Bhagavad Gita describes. So today we are going to take the topic 1. We are going to do the summary study, the thematic study on God, based on Bhagavad Gita and based on other scriptures. And then next week we will see the thematic study on the living entity, Jiva, Jivatma, individual souls. And then the week after next we will see Prakriti, material nature, and Kala, the time factor, and then Karma, the laws of nature. So that will give a thematic study of Bhagavad Gita. And after that, after 3 more sessions, we will do verse by verse, chapter by chapter study of Bhagavad Gita. This next few weeks, next 3 more weeks, including the past 2 weeks, right? That's the first 6 weeks gives an introduction to Bhagavad Gita, or the background required to understand Bhagavad Gita. So on today's topic is Ishvara, God. So the first, subtopic we are going to see is common atheistic arguments. In general, when we talk the topic of God, immediately, the atheistic minded people will say, oh, how do you know God exists? What is the proof? Like that, they come up with so many arguments. What are the different type of arguments an atheist come with to say that there is no God? Why we got to understand? In the Vedic methodology, there is something called Purva Paksha. Now, before in an argument, establish the truth or defeat the opponent, one has to study the other person's views thoroughly. Then only we will be able to come up with counter arguments. So that is why we need to understand, for our own sake, we need to have a very clear understanding why God exists before even understanding who is God. The common atheistic arguments we will see, and then how we can defeat them or counter them. And then we will see logical belief in existence of God. We will see systematic proof for the existence of God. That is our second topic. The third is, what are the different wrong conceptions people have about God? Fourth is the definition for God. After understanding that God exists, some people say God is light, God is force, God is everything, God is nothing. Like that, people come up with the different conceptions. To clear all those misconceptions, first we need to define, are we talking about the same thing when we say God? Different people have different idea. This is the one topic everybody has opinion. If I ask you to talk about quantum mechanics, if you have not studied, you simply will say, I don't know. If I ask you to talk about microeconomics and macroeconomics, oh, I don't know. If I talk about how to do surgery on a particular part of the brain, oh, I don't know. But if I ask about God, immediately everybody has opinion on this world. Whether they know or don't know, still they have opinion. So before, when we further go in this course, we need to establish the definition of God, so that we all have common understanding. When we say God, yes, we all have this common understanding who God is. What is the definition? That is why we first will establish the definition of God. So next, who is God? And after defining God, we need to understand whether God is some kind of light, he or she or it or what. Who is God? Right? That we are going to see. Next is the expansions of God. And then next topic is symptoms of an avatar. So how do we say that we hear all the time in this world, oh, this person is so and so person is an avatar of God. Right? All the time we hear this. Now, how do you recognize somebody is a true avatar or not? For that, there are symptoms described in the scriptures. Based on the symptoms only, we can accept somebody is an avatar or not based on some whimsical somebody's claim. Now, the next important topic, the $1 million question: God is one or many? Especially people coming from Indian background, we all have many. When you go to one's house, they'll have many pictures, many idols in their altar, right? So many gods are there. They said there are 33 crore gods are there. 33 crore devatas are described in the scripture. So is Hinduism is a pantheistic religion, right? God is one or many. That's what you're going to see next. And then about Lord Krishna. Is Lord Krishna a Hindu god? He's a sectarian god, or he is like universal to all? Whether in spite of whether you believe in Hinduism or not, right? Can you see God, Krishna as God or not? That we are going to see in the next topic. And the next is the highest conception of God. The different categories of or different understanding of God is there in this world. Now, what is the highest conception of God? We are going to see that. And the next topic is why there are different religions in this world. If God is one, why there are different religions? And then highest and true religion. What are the different categories of religion? What do they teach? How do I take the essence of all the religion? Those topics we are going to see next. And then, is God a person? or God is some kind of impersonalistic force, right? Is God as a person, or he is like some kind of a formless light entity? What is that? We are going to see. Then the final topic is the logic to establish God is a person, So these are the various topics we are going to see. Now let's jump into our first area, right? Common atheistic argument. What are the different types of atheistic arguments people say when you talk about God? Immediate response: can you show me God? Can you give proof for the existence of God? Have you seen God? Like that, these are the arguments people bring up, right? What is the proof that he exists? Show me the proof, then I will believe, right? And then they say the idea of God is to explain the material nature. In the beginning, people did not know how the nature is working. Then certain group of people, right, the religioustic people, actually they try to explain the world through God. Oh, this world is, because we see in this world, right, various things comes into existence by various, different processes. Did the world come into existence on its own by chance, or the world got created by somebody? Because in the past, people did not have much knowledge about science, Hence, to explain the nature, people have to take the shelter of God. Oh, God created this world, So this is one of the atheistic argument people give. The idea of God is to only to explain the nature. Now, given that science have advanced so much, so this, this religious explanation is not required. God is not required at all. God is an illusion. Some atheistic scientists claim that, God is an illusion. Even here, one guy had written a book called God is Illusion. So this is one of the arguments they give. And then they give another important argument atheists give is that if God exists, who is very merciful, who is all-knowing, all-powerful, omniscient, omnipotent, right? God, if God is one with all this ability, then why suffering exists in this world? Why innocent people get killed? Sometimes small children, for no reason, they get killed. Why? If God exists, this should not happen in this world. Suffering should not exist in this world. Hence, there is no God. This is the different. Another argument people give is that, oh, the concept of God is invented by smart people or group of intelligent people, that to control the rest of the population, to make the population, law abiding, to make the population ensure morality in this world. People invented the concept of God, the idea of God. Oh, if you don't follow the laws of God, you will suffer, right? Like that, people had come up with some kind of a concoction. One guy said, religion is the opium of the masses. To control people, we need religion. Hence, people invented religion. Like that, they come up with. So we are going to see how they're all, wrong arguments. These are all baseless arguments. We will see, logic. Through proper logic, we will come to the conclusion that God has to be there. Our first logical argument to counter the atheistic argument is creation implies creator. Nothing in this world comes into existence on its own, right? If I see a watch, immediately I ask the question, what make it is? Which company made this watch, right? Immediately we ask, who is the maker of the watch? If you see a garden, immediately you know that there is a gardener behind. If you see an invention in this world, immediately there is an inventor. Oh, who invented this? So behind every creation, there is a creator. Even small things of this world, right? We know that there is a creator. Nothing comes into existence by chance. So creation implies creator. Given that the world is functioning in a systematic way, given that the sun and moon are going around, the planets are revolving around, there is no traffic jam, there is no collision in the planetary motions, that there has to be a creator behind this creation. If you see design, immediately we ask the question, who is the designer? So, but when we see the nature, we simply reject, oh, this all, no, there is no God, there is no designer. These are all by chance came into existence. That is one of the scientific theory people give. Big Bang theory. Everything came by chance. Long ago, in the beginning of time, 10 to the power minus 13 seconds. Everything was a small singularity, infinitesimal point, condensed with infinite energy. That energy exploded, and then the matter got created, time started running, and everything started working. Big Bang theory, right? People come up with this Big Bang theory. Scientists say that there is no God behind this creation. Everything got created by chance, by explosion. Is it a valid argument? Right? So if I start a company and the company name is called Little Bang Construction Company, what is the purpose of the company? Now, this company, to construct houses, to construct building, it costs a lot of money, lot of manpower, lot of time, right? If I have to build a building, if I have to build a 10-story building, I need so many people, so much of materials, ingredients required. Now, construction is an expensive business. The labor cost is almost or more than material cost sometimes, right? Construction is very labor intensive processes. So my company's idea is to reduce the labor. How? Now we collect all the ingredient of the building required: cement, sand, stone, plastic, wire, wood, everything. I put in a big container, and then I throw one small special bomb inside. What this bomb will do, when the explosion goes off, immediately all the ingredients of the building will assemble itself, and voila, magically the building is going to come up with. That is why this company's name is called Little Bang Construction Company. And I'm looking for investors in this company. Would you like to invest in this company? Will anybody would like to invest in this company? 1,000 rupees, 100 rupees, 1 rupees, even 1 paisa. Will somebody will invest in such a company? No. The explosion does not create anything. The explosion causes chaos. The explosion causes disorder. Right? By explosion, nothing comes in order. So nothing comes by chance in this world. Creation implies creator. These are all theories people come up with. There is order in this world. Whenever there is order and design, we should know that there is a designer. Whenever there is a creation, there is a creator. So this is the first set of arguments we have to, understand very clearly. Creation implies creator, right? The second is law implies lawmaker, right? We see there are so many laws. For example, right, I'm living in Bangalore, right? And then Bangalore is notorious for its traffic. So to manage the traffic, right, there are various signals and traffic laws have been implemented throughout Bangalore. There are a lot of one-way roads and a lot of signals, a lot of overbridges, a lot of laws regarding traffic have been, put in place. Now, how all these laws came into existence? All these traffic laws of Bangalore came into existence on its own? No. behind all these traffic signals and traffic lights and traffic laws, there are intelligent people who study the traffic pattern. Based on the traffic pattern, they create traffic laws to manage the traffic, right? Law means immediately we should know there is a lawmaker. Even the Constitution of India, behind it, there are personalities involved, headed by Dr. Ambedkar. He is the one who led the effort to create the Constitution of India. So the law of the country is based on the Constitution. So law implies lawmakers or lawmaker. So behind all the natural and physical laws, there is, gravitational law, there is magnetic force law, there is Coulomb's law, there are so many laws, thermodynamics law, laws of motion, Newton mechanics, so many laws are there. Behind all these laws, we have various inventors who invented these laws, right? Did anybody create the law? Discovery and creation, there are two different things. The laws are only discovered. Before Newton, before he invented gravitational law, gravitation did not exist or what? Law means there is a lawmaker behind. Behind all the natural laws, scientists who are discovering laws in the nature, they are only discovering it. They are not creating it. They are not inventing it. They're just only discovering the existing laws. So that means, who is the lawmaker behind all this law? Because law implies lawmaker. There has to be lawmaker. Who is that lawmaker? So behind all these laws, there is a supreme lawmaker with supreme intelligence is there. And Krishna tells in Bhagavad Gita, the principle of God, he is the unseen thread in the creation. Sometimes when we see creation, we can understand, that there is a creator. Sometimes it may not be so obvious. Krishna tells, Matta Paratamanyat Kinchidasti Dhanajaya Sutre Manigana Eva, right? He says that this material world, behind this material creation, right? Krishna tells God is the thread which holds everything together. Sutre Manigana Eva. If you take a necklace which is made of pearls, what is it holding together? The thread. Is the thread visible? No. The whole basis for the necklace is the thread which holds the thing together. Similarly, the entire creation, even though it might be going on, there might be so many laws. What is the holding factor? What is the factor behind all this thing? Which is the one which holds together the entire creation? The unforeseen hands of God. Sutre Manigana Eva. How a thread, sutra is required for a money necklace, a necklace made up of money, pearls. Similarly, behind all this creation, there is, the unseen hand of God. So this is the third argument. In Bhagavad Gita 7th chapter, 7th verse, Krishna gives this, Matta Paratram Nanyat Kinchidasti Dhanajaya, right? 7.7. Right? Mai sarvam idam protam sutre manigana eva. Right? So Krishna is telling that behind all this creation, there is God. He is the unforeseen force. Fourth, the idea of creation by chance violates laws of nature. We saw that behind all the laws, there is always a lawmaker. Behind all the creation, there is a creator. Just to say that by chance something came which is violate the laws of nature. Nothing comes by chance. When we say by chance, that means we do not understand. For example, when I take a coin and toss it up in the air, and then we say by chance, the chance of getting head or tail is 50-50. We say 50% chance of getting head, 50% chance of getting tail. Why? We say probability. Why we say chance? Because we do not understand all the forces acting on at the time when we toss a coin in the air. If somebody is very intelligent, if somebody has all the fine equipments to measure all the forces which are acting when somebody tosses a coin, for example, the type of material it's made up of, what is the viscosity of air, how much is the gravitation, how much is the force that person applied while tossing tossing the coin in the air. Like that, if you understand all the forces acting upon that coin, one could exactly predict whether it's going to land head or tail, right? Because we do not have the ability to understand all the forces, we immediately take shelter of probability and chance theory. So in nature doesn't play dice. In the one of the greatest scientists of this world, Albert Einstein, he said God never plays dice. That means nothing happens by chance. In laws of nature, for every cause there is a cause, another cause behind it. Like that, for every cause and effect, right, there is another cause. Ultimately, behind all the causes, there is a supreme cause. Sarva Karana Karanam. Right? Behind all the causes, there has to be a cause. So hence, there has to be God. The idea of creation, right, by chance is obscene, right? It doesn't make any sense. Then fifth argument is that the search for God is a fundamental urge in all of us, right? If you see in nature, people have different propensities or urges. I have the urge to become thirsty. Now, if I become thirsty, what do? I drink water. I have the urge to become hungry. When I become hungry, what do? Eat food, right? To subside my hunger, right? I have the urge to see. I have eyes. I have different urges. For all the urges in this world, there is a natural arrangement by material nature to fulfill the urges. When you become hungry, there is water available. When you become thirsty, there is water available. When you become hungry, there is food available, or food stuff, fruits and other vegetables and grains. So many things are available, right? People have the urge to have sex. Then opposite sex is available, right? For every urge we have, you name it, any urge we have, we can find a fulfillment in this world. Similarly, given the fact that we all have urge to find out God, we have the urge to worship God, we have the urge to take shelter of God, we all have the urge to take shelter of some higher power, then that automatically means there has to be a fulfillment for that urge. We all have, propensity to worship or to take shelter of something. Even scientists, they are taking shelter of the science and laws, right? We all have the propensity to take shelter or worship something. Given that we all have the urges in common, there has to be an object of fulfillment should exist to fulfill that urge. How? Water is commonly available for everybody. Doesn't matter who you are, right? If we drink water, automatically our thirst will get quenched. Similarly, it doesn't matter who you are. If you eat some food, automatically your hunger should subside. Similarly, we all have the propensity to worship God. Hence, there has to be a naturally supreme object of worship should be there to fulfill that need. This is the fifth argument. And sixth, and very important argument, is the personal experience of God. When people say that, oh, show me the proof for God, show me God, I'll believe it. Krishna tells in the 9th chapter, 2nd verse, Raja Vidya Raja Guhyam, Pavitram Idamuttamam, Pratyaksha Vakamam Dharmyam, Susukam Kartum Avyayam. Krishna is telling this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna, what I'm teaching, this is one can practically realize, right? One can practically realize. Pratyaksha Vagamam Dharmyam. Pratyaksha means direct sense perception. By following the process given in Bhagavad Gita, one can realize themselves, one can experience God personally themselves. When somebody says that, show me God, I will believe it, right? Immediately we should ask the question, what is the qualification? Do we have the ability to see God? If somebody says that, if scientists are saying that everything is made up of atoms and atoms are made up of electrons and protons and neutrons, right? And the scientists published research papers, and then later those research papers based on that, textbooks have been created, textbooks have been given to students, the teachers teach to the students that everything is made up of atoms and atoms are made up of electrons and protons and neutrons. Now, if the child challenges that question, no, I won't believe, show me proof, then I will believe, right? If somebody says like that, will he pass the exam? No. If the child simply accepts the authority of the teacher and writes the exam, he can pass. After passing high school, after passing, college, getting a degree in physics, BSc physics, and then doing a master's in nuclear physics, getting a PhD in nuclear physics, then he can go to the government facility. There is an equipment called cyclotron. Using that, one can conduct the experiment and realize the knowledge. Similarly, when we say, show me God, I will believe, we should first ask the question, do we have qualification to see the God? When I say electrons exist, show me, I will believe it. First, we need to get a qualification to see the electron. I need to get a PhD in nuclear physics to enter into the government facility to conduct the experiment in cyclotron to prove whether electron exists or not. Similarly, when we say God exists, right? When somebody asks proof, give the proof for the God, we should ask the question, what is the qualification? First, we need to be qualified. So that's what Krishna tells in Bhagavad Gita. Pratyaksha Vagamam Dharmyam. You can experience God personally through your senses. For that, one need to get qualified. Raja Vidya Raja Guhyam. This is the king of knowledge. This is the most secret of all secrets. Raja Gujya Pavitram Idam Uttamam. This is the purest of knowledge I am giving Krishna, Arjuna. Pavitram Idam Uttamam. This is the highest. Pratyaksha Vagamam Dharmyam means that this can be realized. One can realize the self by following the practical process given in Gita. Right? It is not some theoretical thing. Right? Also, when Krishna gives the 11th chapter, 54th verse, he tells, right, that Bhaktyat Ananya Yasakya Agam Eva Vidorjana Nyatum Drashtum Cha Tatvena Praveshtum Cha Parantapa. What does it mean? Krishna is telling Bhaktyat Ananya Yasakya. One can, Krishna is telling, oh my dear Arjuna, you can realize me, you can attain me by undivided, pure devotional service. Right? That means when we develop pure love for God, we can experience God, we can see the hand of God in everything. We can experience God personally. So this is the ultimate proof for the existence of God. Before simply challenging, one should qualify himself, right, to see God and to realize God. These are the various logical things. And what are the wrong conceptions people have about God? Right? Even among the theistic people, even the believers of God have so many wrong conceptions and wrong ideas about God. What are some of the wrong ideas? People think that God is some kind of an impersonal light. When we say light, what kind of a light? Sunlight, moonlight, LED light, fluorescent light, candles light? What light it is? Red light, blue light? People say God is light. What does it mean? This is one of the wrong ideas. God is some kind of a force, through which everything else is working. We can say gravitation force is also God. Magnetic force is God. Electrical force is God. These are all God. These are all God. Some kind of a force, people say God. And God is void. God is shunyata. God is zero. When you remove everything, ultimately you will attain nothing, and that is God. Nirvana. And sometimes people say, everyone is God. I am God, you are God, we are all walking gods. Why do you need God somewhere else? Right? This is another wrong conception. And some people say there are many gods. There are one so-called spiritual guru. He says, I'm not here to claim that I am God. I'm here to prove that everyone is God. Right? Or he says that if anyone is lesser, everyone thinks, right, I am lesser than God, he is not self-confident. These are some of the wrong conceptions about God. These are all not correct. These are all not based on bona fide scriptural knowledge. And some people claim that God is dead. God created this world and God went out of control. The world went out of control and then God get depressed and died. So this is another logic, like wrong conception people have of God. So now let us really try to understand what God really is. That is why we are coming up with definition of God, right? God is one, but it can be defined in many ways, right? The first definition is that God is the source of everything, right? People say the word God means generator, operator, destroyer, right? Creation, maintenance, annihilation. So that's what the word God means. God is source of everything, right? Everything has a source in this world, and God is the ultimate source of everything. Sarva Karana Karanam. Isha Upanishad says, right? Om Purnam Ada Purnam, right? It is mentioned, this mantra nicely says, right? Om Purnam Ada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udayachate Purnam Purnatya Adaya Purnam Eva Vashishyate. What does it mean? The personality of Godhead is perfect and complete, and because he is perfectly complete, all emanations from him, such as the phenomenal world, are perfectly equipped as complete wholes. Whatever is produced of complete whole is also complete in itself. Because he is the complete whole, even though so many complete units emanate from him, he remains in complete balance. Right? This is one of the very important Upanishad. The first mantra in the equation, Isha Upanishad, talks about God. God is the source of everything, right? The next is God is the supreme controller of everything. He is omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent. Omniscient means he knows everything. Omnipresent means he is present everywhere. And omnipotent means he is all powerful. There is nothing that he cannot do. Sometimes some type of religion propounds this an idea that God cannot be all the three: omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent. One of them he might be lagging. So they come up with some kind of a wrong idea about God. No, God is the supreme controller of everything. Nothing moves without the will of the Lord. Even a blade of grass moves without the Lord, without the will of the Lord. He's the supreme. Because why is the supreme controller of everything? Because he created it. Because he created everything, then he can control. He knows how to control everything. Because he is the creator, he knows how to control everything. He is the supreme controller of everything. The third aspect is that God is the supreme proprietor of everything, right? Because he created everything, because he controls everything, everything is under his control, he can claim the proprietorship, right? Right? The person who has the key to control the car, we know that who will have the key for controlling the car? The proprietor, right? Because he is able to control, because he is the one created, then he can be claimed as the proprietor. He is the supreme proprietor of everything. This is the third aspect of definition of God. And fourth, he is the supreme enjoyer. Because he is the proprietor, because he is the controller, because he is the creator of everything, source of everything, everything has to be there for his pleasure only. So this is the fourth aspect of God. Now, the second definition or the fifth aspect we see, which is given in Vishnu Purana, right? God means the possessor of all opulence in the world. When we say opulence, Vishnu Purana describes there are 6 types of opulence: wealth, beauty, knowledge, strength, renunciation, and fame. It is mentioned Aishwaryasya Samagrasya, Viryasya Yashashraya, Jnana Vairagyaschaiva Sannam Bhagat Idimgana. Full wealth, strength, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. These are 6 opulences of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. An ordinary human being may possess some, one or more of these opulences, but in insignificant measure. Whereas God is He who possesses all these things unlimitedly. That is the definition of God Vishnu Purana gives, right? Any wealth, any opulence we have in this world, right? That person becomes influential. That person becomes attractive, right? If I make an announcement that Bill Gates is going to do a seminar, online seminar on the topic of how to become a millionaire, how many people will be joining? Even our study of Bhagavad Gita, 100 people subscribed, right? But any given time, 15 or 20 people only join. Why? Because they don't have any attraction to those topics, right? People get attracted to various opulences. Somebody is wealthy, people get attracted. Somebody is beautiful, people get attracted. Somebody is powerful, or they possess some capability, like sports stars, people get attracted to them. People who are very, very knowledgeable, they get attracted by other people, right? So any amount of this opulence, knowledge, wealth, beauty, right? Even renunciation attracts people. That's why sadhus, whenever sadhu comes, right, so many people, so many followers, people, they attract so many followers, right? Because they possess some amount of renunciation. God means He has to possess in complete, in full, for all time to come. When He possesses all the 6 opulences in the past, present, and future, incomplete, in full, He can be called as Bhagavan, God. These are the 2 nice definition. God means the supreme source of everything, supreme controller of everything, supreme proprietor of everything, supreme enjoyer of everything. And then God means we should be the possessor of the 6 opulences in complete, right? Wealth, beauty, knowledge, strength, fame, and renunciation. It can be called as God. So these are definitions. Forward in all our discussions, these 2 definitions will always hold good. We'll also have more understanding for definition of God. For example, God is no one equal to Him or above Him. That is God. And someone for whom there is no one equal or above him, he can be called as God. Right? Like that, there are various definitions are there, but these are the 2 critical definitions we will use in our further study or discussion. So the next important topic today is, who is God? Right? Now we understand that God is the supreme creator, supreme source, supreme proprietor, supreme enjoyer, supreme controller, and is the possessor of all wealth, all beauty, all strength, all knowledge, all renunciation. Does anybody even fit this definition? Who is God? Right? That is $1 million question, right? Lord Shri Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. Why are we saying this? Is it because I like black color, Krishna is in black color? Because I like flute and Krishna plays flute? Because I like to flirt with girls and Krishna was always like, playing with gopis? Or, I like to cheat. I like to steal. And Krishna was always stealing butter. Right? Is it that's the reason why we are claiming, we are saying that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead? No, it is based on scriptures, based on authority of Bhagavad Gita. Krishna tells very clearly in Bhagavad Gita who he is, right? In the beginning, Krishna tells in the 4th chapter, Evam Parampara Praptam Imam Rajarshi Vidga Sakalena Magata Yoga Nashta Parantapa. Right? He is telling that Arjuna, in the beginning of creation, I spoke this knowledge to Vivashwan, sun god. Sun god spoke to his son Manu. Manu spoke to his son Ikshvaku. Like that, it was coming in a disciplic succession over the period of time. Right? The disciplic succession is broken. The knowledge as it is appears to be lost. Now again, I am here to speak the same knowledge to you, Arjuna, because you are my friend and a disciple. Friend and a devotee. Right? He says. Now, at that time, immediately, Arjuna asks a question. Krishna, I am 95 years old. You are 96 years old. By the way, when Mahabharata war was happening, right? Krishna was 96 years old. Arjuna was 95 years old. You know? Krishna, you are just 96. Sun God have been in existence. Sun have been in existence for millions and millions of years. How am I to understand you spoke this knowledge in the beginning of creation? This is the question in future generation everybody will have. Please clear this doubt. Arjuna asked this question. So immediately Krishna responses to Arjuna. Arjuna, you and me have taken many, many births. You remember none of them. I remember all of them. This is the first time Krishna establishes in Bhagavad Gita the difference between the jivas, the living entities, which is us, unto Krishna, the Paramatma, Bhagavan. Right? So we are saying that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Why? Because that's what the scripture says. Right? Lord Krishna is the source of everything. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. Agam sarvasya prabho matta sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajande mam buddha bhava samanvidaha. I am the source of everything. Everything emanates from me. An intelligent, wise person who understands this, who he worships me with all his heart. This is one of the very important slokas of Bhagavad Gita, 10.8. There are 4 slokas in Bhagavad Gita, 10.8, 10.9, 10.10, 10.11. They are called Chatur Shloki of Bhagavad Gita, are the 4 nutshell key verses of Bhagavad Gita. If you understand these 4 verses, we can understand that the essence of Bhagavad Gita. So in the first verse, 108 number, you remember, put a dot in between 100 and 0 and 8, 108, 10.8, 10th chapter, 8th verse. Krishna says, Aham sarvasya prabho. I am the source of everything. Matta sarvam pravartate. Everything emanated from me. Iti matva bhajante mam. Buddha bhava samanvitaga. A Buddha. Buddha means a self-realized person, enlightened person, intelligent person. Understands this truth that I am the source of everything and everything is emanating from me. Right? He worships me with all his heart. Buddha bhava samanvitaha. Right? So it's same thing in Brahma Samhita, scripture which is spoken by Lord Brahma to Narada Muni. So Brahma in the glorification, after receiving the knowledge from Vishnu, he glorifies Vishnu. In the prayers offered to Vishnu, which is called Brahma Samhita prayers, 5th chapter, 1st verse itself, he says, Ishvara Paramakrishna Sachidananda Vigraha Anadiradi Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. He's saying, Krishna, you are the Sarva Karana Karanam. Krishna is the source of all causes. He is the cause of all causes. And Krishna says in the 9th chapter, 10th verse, right? He says, right? Maya dakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam. Ketu nanena kaunteya jagat vipra vartate. He is saying this material nature, which is one of my energies, is working under my direction. O son of Kunti, producing all moving and non-moving beings. Under its rules, this manifestation created and annihilated again and again. Krishna is telling this material nature, which is working like a clockwork, right? Without fail, the material nature is arranging everything. Because of that, everything is created and everything is annihilated. This material nature, this Prakriti is working under my direction, under my supreme direction. I am the supreme controller here, he is saying, right? Again, Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, right? He is the proprietor of everything. Bhoktaram yajya tapasam sarvaloka mageshwaram sugurtam sarvabhutanam yatma mam shanti brachati. Right? He is saying, I am the supreme, I am the proprietor of everything. Bhoktaram yajya tapasam. Everything, all the penance and austerities, all the tapasyas, all the sacrifices are there to please me, to make me happy, because I am the supreme proprietor. I'm the supreme proprietor of everything. I'm the supreme controller of everything. Krishna is telling, And again, Krishna says in 9.4, he's the supreme enjoyer, right? Aham ki sarva yajnanam bhokta cha prabhureva cha natumam abhijananti tatvanesha chayantite. He's saying, I am the only enjoyer and master of all sacrifices. Therefore, those who do not recognize my true transcendental nature fall down. Right? Krishna everywhere in Bhagavad Gita very clearly establishes that who he is. Right? And Krishna says that he is the father of all. This is a very important verse in the 14th chapter. Sarva yonishi kaunteya murtaya sambhavantiya tasam brahmas magat yonir aham bija pradapitaha. Right? Aham bija pita. Right? I am the seed giving father of all living entities. Right? This verse says, it should be understood that all species of life, O son of Kunti, are made possible by birth in this material nature, and that I am the seed giving father. Right? He is the cause of all causes. He is the father of all. He is the supreme father. And Lord Krishna is the supreme knower. In the 7th chapter, Krishna says, Vedagam samatitani vartamanani charjana. Right? Bhavishani cha bhutani mamtu vedana kaschana. He is saying, O Arjuna, as the supreme personality of Godhead, I know everything that has happened in the past, all that is happening in the present, and all things that are yet to come, the future. I also know all living entities, but me no one knows. So he is the supreme knower. Lord Krishna is the supreme absolute truth. In the 7th chapter, 7th verse, we already saw, Matta Paratanam Nanyat Kinchidasti Dhananjaya. Mai sarvam idam protam sutre manigana iva. He is telling that, right, there is no truth superior to me. O conqueror of wealth, Dhananjaya, there is no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me as pearls are strung on a thread. Right? Krishna is telling very clearly, there is no truth superior to him. Matta parataram nanyat. There is nothing superior to me. Kinchit asti Dhananjaya. Know this, O conqueror of wealth. Right? So now Krishna is claiming, and various scriptures is telling that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. Not only that, all the great sages also say the same thing. Right? After Krishna says this 4 key nutshell verses, 10.8, 10.9, 10.10 and 10.11, right? Krishna says, Agam sarvasi prabhu matta sarvam pravartete iti matva bhajantevam buddha samanvitaha. I am the source of everything. Everything emanates from me. Intelligent persons worships me with all his heart. How he worships? Right? In the next 10.9, he explains. Machida madgada prana bodhayanta parasparam kadayantascha mam nityam tushyanti cha ramanti cha. How one worships me? By always conversing about me, always thinking of me, always making me as his goal. Machita madgada prana bodhayanta parasparam. They enlighten each other. How? By talking about me. Kadayantascha mam nityam. They are my transcendental pastimes, they always discuss. Tushyanti cha ramanti cha. By discussing about this, they derive pleasure. In the next verse, 10.10, he says, one who always worships me like this, I give the knowledge through which he can come to me. Tesham aham samudartha. No. That verse 10.10, right? He is telling that he is giving buddhi yoga, right? He is giving, I am giving the intelligence through which they can come to me. In the next verse 10.11, he says, right, that how I give intelligence? By destroying the darkness born out of ignorance with a shining lamp of knowledge from his heart. As Paramatma in the heart of every living entity, I give the knowledge when somebody is developing love for me. After saying these 4 key verses, immediately Arjuna says that, Arjuna Uvacha, it says 10.11, 10.12 and 13, Arjuna Uvacha, Param Brahma Parandama Pavitram Paramam Bhavan Purusham Shashvatam Divyam Adidevam Ajam Vibhum Agustvam Rishish Sarve Devarishir Naradastata Ashito Devalo Vyasaga Swayam Chaiva Bravishime. Arjuna is telling, Arjuna said, you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the ultimate abode, the purest, the absolute truth. You are eternal, transcendental, original person, the unborn, the greatest. All the great sages such as Narada, Ashita, Devala, Vyasa confirm this truth about you. And now you yourself are declaring it to me. Here Arjuna very clearly saying, right, Krishna, you are saying that you are supreme and I accept it. Not only that, because I am your brother-in-law, I am accepting it. All the great sages also accepted it in the past. Who are they? Ashita, Devala, Narada, Vyasa, all the great sages, all the Vedic authorities, they all accepted you, Krishna, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So from this we can understand, the identity of God. Right? So now the next topic is the expansions of God. God, he is being infinite, unlimited. He also can expand unlimited without decreasing his potency. Like in this world, if you create something out of something, that something has to decrease. Right? When you create a part, when you create a byproduct from the whole decreases. Whereas that is not true with Krishna. Right? Krishna, there are infinite, unlimited expansions expand. But Krishna still remains the original without reducing in potency. All the expansions of God, they are all equal in power. Right? There are unlimited expansions. Right? They are simultaneously one and different. Even though they expand into many, they are all same. At the same time, they all have different forms, different moods, and different type of, reciprocation to different devotees. He expands into many, but they exhibit different qualities. They are one and different simultaneously. This is the inconceivable nature. Achintya Beda Abeda. Right? In spiritual mathematics, 1 minus 1 is not equal to 0. It is 1. Brahma Samhita says, it is like there are thousands of candles in a room which is lit. All of them are equal in potency. But we should know that there is one candle which is the source of all the other candle, from which all the other candle was lit. This is the analogy Brahma Samhita gives, Lord Brahma gives. Like that, there are many expansions, Krishna, but Krishna, you are the original source of everything, right? He is the original source and fountainhead of all. That's what even Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam says. This verse in Bhagavatam, first canto, 3rd chapter and 28th verse says, right? Ete cha kalapumsa Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam Indrari Vyakulam Lokam Mradiyanti Yuge Yuge. Before this verses, there are 20 different incarnations are described. Vamana, Varaha, Kurma, Matsya, Narsimha, right? All these different incarnations are described. After describing, Suta Goswami says, right, Krishna is the original personality of Godhead. He is the Bhagavan himself. Even though Krishna is described as one of the avatars, but he is the source of all the avatars. He is not just an avatar. He is an avatari. This is the conclude. This is the most essential verse in the entire 18,000 slokas of Srimad Bhagavatam. This is the Parivasha Shudra of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Ete chamsa kalapamsa Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam Indrari Vyakulum Lokam Pradyanti Yuge Yuge. Right? So this verse very clearly establishes God is one, he expands into many. Right? He is simultaneously one and different. Whenever he expands, his original form, potency does not decrease. He is the fountainhead of all, as Srimad Bhagavatam says. All expansions are there simply to assist the Supreme Personality of Godhead to enjoy his different variegated tastes of love with his devotees. All the expansion, why God expands into so many forms? To reciprocate to his devotees in different ways. Right? That's the reason why he expands into many. Right? That's what the scripture says. Right? Now, next is very important concept, the descent of God. Right? The descent of God. Descent means avatar. We heard the word avatar all the time. Avatar means one who descends. Avatar is not created. Avatar means one who already, the personality already exists somewhere. When he descends into this world, he is called avatar. Right? Avatar means from time to time, the various forms of the Lord, which are existing eternally in the Vaikuntha planets, when he descends in this material world for a particular purpose, he is called an avatar. You know, he is not just created at the time and then after he finishes his Leela, it's not over. The same personality exists in the spiritual world eternally. In general, the avatars comes for the following purpose as per Bhagavad Gita. In the 4th chapter, 8th verse, Krishna tells, right, why he comes. Why he comes into this world. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya shadishkritam dharma samsapanartaya sambhavami yuge yuge. He is telling to establish yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bharati bhavata abhyutanam adharmasya tadatmanam shrajamyaham. He is telling Arjuna, I descend in this world millennium after millennium to re-establish dharma. Whenever there is a decline in religious principles, I descend into this world to establish religion. Second, he tells to protect the devotees and saintly person. Paritranaya sadhunam, to protect the sadhus, protect my devotees. Vinashaya shadishkritam, to annihilate the miscreants who cause disruption in the functioning of this world. Whenever this irreligious peoples, whenever people who create atrocity in this world, whenever demoniac forces are in rise, God descends into this world to put them under check, to put them under control. That's why he comes. Right? The most important reason Krishna also tells is he appears in this world to give pleasure to his devotees, to attack the minds of the people of this world. Right? When we hear about the Krishna's pastimes, childhood pastimes in Vrindavan, right? Doesn't matter who that person is, they will get attracted. Right? So that is why Krishna says why he appears in this world. That's the purpose of avatar. Now, what is the symptom of an avatar? Right? There are so many different types of avatars. So many people are claiming avatars. Right? There are different, at least 5 categories of avatars. Purusha avatars, Leela avatars, Manvantar avatars, Yuga avatar. Right? Like that, there are 5 categories of avatars are described in scriptures. Now, what is the symptom of an avatar? Right? Symptom is he must be predicted in the scripture. It should not be based on some whimsical concoction of some sentimental followers. It should have been in bona fide scripture, there should be a reference. For example, appearance of Kalki is predicted by in the end of Kali Yuga in Bhagavatam. Right? After 400,000 years, right? Kali Yuga lasts for 432,000 years, 432,000 years. Only in Kali Yuga, 5,000 years have gone. After approximately 427,000 years later, Lord will appear as Kalki. Why? At the time, the religiosity will be so much going on. No, he will annihilate all the miscreants, and then he will leave the Dharmatma to start the Satya Yuga. Right? It should be predicted in scripture, avatars. Right? Second, he must display his universal form. When somebody claims God, I am God, we should ask them, show your Vishwarup. Then immediately that person might say, oh, I will show only to my devotee. Right? What kind of nonsense is that? Right? Krishna showed his Vishwarup to all of the people in the battlefield. When Krishna was speaking Bhagavad Gita, in the 10th, after hearing the 10th chapter, Arjuna asked Krishna, now I'm willing to see your Vishwarup. How, through which, how you are pervading the entire world, how everything is managed by you. I want to see that form. The Virata Rupa. Right? When Krishna immediately gives the transcendental divine eyes to Arjuna. You can see this now. If somebody says that I will show, you need to have divine eyes to see my universal form, we should ask the person, why don't you give me the divine eyes? How Krishna gave Arjuna the divine eyes and saw the Vishwarup, similarly you give. Then I will accept you as avatar. So avatars is not some whimsical thing. He should, if anybody who claims avatar, he should show Vishwarup, Virat Rup form, like how Krishna showed to Arjuna. Third, he must perform extraordinary activities impossible for others to perform. Right? Like Krishna lifting the Govardhan hill. Right? With his left hand, left little finger, lifted the entire Govardhana hill, and he was standing, effortlessly playing flute in one hand and holding this Giriraj, Govardhan hill in one hand. Right? This pastime is described in Srimad Bhagavatam. He should be able to, he must perform extraordinary activities. Next, he must have a unique message and mission. Whenever he appears, we should give that unique message. For example, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who appeared 500 years ago, he gave this unique message of Harinam Sankirtan. Lord God can be realized simply by chanting his names in this age of Kali. Right? That is the Yuga Dharma. And he was indiscriminate. He was giving to all, whether you are qualified or not qualified. Take up the love, attain the pure love of God by chanting the holy names of God. That's what Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's message is unique, because there is no qualification required. Anybody and everybody can attain perfection. Right? Next, he must have certain special marks and features on his body as per the revealed scriptures. For example, there are various symbols are described in the palms of Krishna, in the feet of Krishna, in the soul of Krishna, described nicely in Bhagavatam. All those markings, they clearly indicate that he is an avatar. Right? That should be the criteria to evaluate an avatar. I will take few more minutes. Sorry, we are going little, little over because we started a little late. I will take few more minutes and then I will conclude. God is one or many, right? The common misconception among the Hindus especially is pantheism. Pantheism means many gods. That is not true according to Bhagavad Gita and according to Veda, according to Srimad Bhagavatam, according to Vedas very clearly. God is only one with capital G, right? But there are many devatas. To understand this, we need to understand there are two categories. Vedas and scriptures described Bhagavan and Devatas. Bhagavan means whenever it is described about the Lord, the word Bhagavan is used. Whenever Krishna speaks in Bhagavad Gita, it doesn't say Shri Krishna Vacha. It will tell Shri Bhagavan Vacha. Whenever Vishnu speaks, it will say Shri Bhagavan Vacha. It won't say Shri Vishnu Vacha. But whenever Brahma says Shri Brahma Vacha, whenever Lord Shiva says, it will say Shri Rudra Vacha. Whenever Indra says, right? Shri Indra Uvacha. But whenever Vishnu or Krishna speaks, he will always say Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. From this understanding, there are two categories, Devatas and Bhagavan, right? Lord Krishna and his incarnations and expansions are always supreme and independent. Whereas the Devatas, all other personalities Vedic scriptures mentions, they are all subordinate and dependent. The demigods have no independent authority or power. They always work under the direction. So the demigods, whenever there is a disturbance, whenever there is a problem which is not solvable, they all approach Brahma, and Brahma approaches Shiva, and Shiva takes all of them to the milk ocean shore, to the shore of the milk ocean, Shirashagaram. They all assemble, they offer the prayers, Purusha Shutta prayers, and the Lord appears and gives solution to their problem, right? They don't have independent authority. They are all working on behalf of the personality of Godhead. Lord Krishna is the origin of all demigods. Krishna tells in Bhagavad Gita, right? In the 10th chapter, right? 2nd verse. He says, Name vidu suraganaha prabhavam na magarshayah agam adirhi devanam magarshinam cha sarvashaka. Neither the host of demigods nor the great sages know my origin or opulence, for in every respect I am the source of demigods and sages. Right? Krishna is the source of all the demigods. Right? Again, the demigods are empowered living entities. They are all jivas like you and me, but they are all empowered with God Shakti to manage the administrative functions of the universe. Like, for example, Brahma is in charge of creation, Lord Shiva is in charge of annihilation, Indra is in charge of rain, Vayu is in charge of air, Agni is in charge of fire, Surya is in charge of light and energy, Ganesha in charge of removing the obstacles, right? Saraswati in charge of knowledge, Devi, Parvati, she is in charge of punishment, Durga, Lakshmi in charge of wealth, Kuvera again is the treasurer of wealth, Yamaraj in dispelling judgments based on right and wrong. These are all the different functions of the Devatas, whereas God is supreme, He is independent, He is Swarat. Each universe has own set of demigods, right? Brahma's life in our universe is described as 100 years of his lifetime, which is equivalent to 311 trillion 40 billion years. That is the lifespan of Brahma. Like that, there are many universes, and different universes, different Brahmas have different duration of life. Right? 311 trillion 40 billion years is the lifespan of Brahma. All the Devatas, right? They are all there in each universe. Our universe has one set of Brahma, Rudra, Indra, Vayu, Varna. Like that, different universe will have one set of maintainers and administrators. How each country has one set of ministers and managers, prime minister, and under him there is various ministers to manage different departments. Demigods reside in higher planetary system. Each one of them, they have their own abode. Brahma resides in Satyaloka, right? Indra and all the other primary demigods, they stay in Svargaloka, right? Lord Surya is in Suryaloka, in sun planet. Moon, Soma, is in moon planet. Like that, they have different abodes. And demigods are all devotees of the Lord. They are all these representatives in the universe, right? One should not be disrespectful to them. One should be respectful to all of them. But at the same time, one should not equate God, Bhagavan, to the Devatas, the demigods. They are all his representatives. They are all working under his direction. So we should give respect to all the Devatas. But at the same time, we should recognize that there is only one God, Bhagavan. So is Lord Krishna a Hindu god? No, God is God. He does not belong to any community like that. He does not belong to any particular religious people or something like that. He is universal, right? God is one, right? One same God is known by different names in different languages. For example, Allah means all powerful, right? Jehovah means the greatest, right? Rama means the reservoir of all pleasure. Krishna means the attractive, the all attractive one, right? So we have to understand that Krishna means it's the same God. Different religions are talking about. God is only one. He has many names, many qualities. In many languages, it's been described with different names. Even the Mahabharata, Vishnu Shakasharanam, 1,000 names of Vishnu is described. 99 names of Allah is described in Quran, right? Right? Holy name of God, praised by holy name of God is described in Bible. So God is only one. So we are talking about the same God with different names. Different names, right? Right? But they are all same personalities. Right? Lord Krishna in Bhagavad Gita very clearly says that he is the conclusion of all. His name encompasses all other names. He is all attractive, right? Krishna means it includes all other names. He is Sachidananda Vigraha. He is actually full of eternity, knowledge and bliss, right? All attractive not only for human beings but all other species of life. We can see when Krishna was playing his flute, not only the gopis get attracted, the gopas get attracted, the peacocks, the trees, the animals, the deers, the cows, every one of them gets attracted to the form of Krishna, right? To the sound of Krishna. And Lord Krishna exhibited the 6 opulences in complete through various pastimes in this world, right? And Lord Krishna eternally enjoys loving pastimes with his devotees in his abode of Goloka, right? God has both this majestic and sweet qualities. Krishna exhibits both this majestic and sweet qualities. He showed his Vishvirat Roop. At the same time, he demonstrated his sweetness with the residents of Vrindavan. And Krishna is the reservoir of all pleasure. And his only occupation is transcendental loving exchange with his devotees. This is the highest conception of God. Why there are different religions? Knowledge of God according to the time, place and circumstance and the condition of his audience. God reveals knowledge about himself to different degrees and different levels. That's why there are different religions are there. All bona fide religions are path leading to God, right? Basic tenets of all religions are same, right? They teach that this world is a place of suffering, that live a pure life, do not sin, obey the laws of God, and then surrender to God, serve God, and love him, right? This is the conclusive teaching of all religions. The essence is same, right? And Vedas gives the highest conception of God by describing, detailing his names, forms, associates, message, abode, and paraphernalia. All these details are described in the various parts of the Vedas. What are his names? What are his forms? What are his activities? Who are his associates? What he does? Everything is described in the Vedas, right? Vedas gives the complete detail. Whereas the other scriptures, they might just give reference as kingdom or heaven of God, right? Similarly, some qualities and messages of God might be indicated, but not completely described. Why? Because people are not capable of understanding, right? In front of, during the Last Supper, Jesus Christ, when he told his 10 disciples, right? He was telling, right? Oh, men of lower faith, I have a lot more to reveal, but you are not ready. Right? The teachings of Jesus, the teachings of Muhammad, they are all perfect, but the people don't understand it properly. Right? The other scriptures, because why they don't teach the full details, because the audience may not be able to understand. Right? The Vedic scriptures are like a large dictionary, and other scriptures are like pocket dictionary. This is not, we are trying to minimize some religion. If you do comparative religion, if you study systematically all the scriptures, you will come to the conclusion, right? The Vedas gives more and more detailed conclusion about God. It gives more. It's not contradicted to other scriptures. There is no contradiction between other scriptures and Vedas, but it gives more elaborate knowledge. It is like a professor teaching mathematics. A professor who teaches mathematics, if he goes to college, he will teach like very high topics, right? The same professor goes to elementary school, he will teach some basic attraction, basic addition and subtraction, and division and multiplication he might teach. But if it goes to college, he will teach like integration, differentiation, complex numbers, complex variables, complex regions, like that. The same professor, depending on the capacity of the audience, he will teach differently, right? Jesus Christ himself was a perfect teacher, but his followers were not ready. Hence, he couldn't reveal everything, right? It is like a professor teaching to different categories of students. Vedas gives prescriptions to all. This is very, very important concept, In order to become a Christian, you got to follow certain tenets. Otherwise, you will be rejected as Christian. In order to become a Muslim, you have to follow certain. In order to become the follower of Islam, you have to follow certain tenets. Otherwise, you will be rejected. But Vedas gives prescription for all people from all capacity. They all can find a place in Vedas. Even highest sage to a lowest person who may not understand many things, there is prescriptions given in Vedas. Vedas does not reject. It is like encyclopedia. It has place for all, right? It is called Sanatana Dharma, the eternal religion of man, not based on birth, not based on caste, not based on race, not based on circumstances, not based on some material situation. If I happen to take birth in a Hindu family, I am a Hindu. If I have to take a birth in the Muslim family, I am a Muslim. If I have to take a chance to take birth in a Christian family, I am a Christian. If I take birth in a Jewish family, I am Jew. If I take birth in an atheist family, I become atheist. They are all circumstantial. But Vedas teach universal, Sanatana Dharma for all mankind. You don't have to belong to any caste, creed, or religion. They are non-sectarian. Right? The true religion, Srimad Bhagavatam declares, Save Pumsham Paro Dharmo, Yado Bhakti Radokchaje, Akaitri Apragatiyata, Ya Atma Suprasidati. The supreme occupation dharma for all humanity is that by which men can attain loving devotional service unto transcendental Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated, uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. So this is the highest religion. Srimad Bhagavatam describes, right? Is God a person? Absolutely, he is a person, right? Simultaneously, he has form and formless. The three aspects of absolute truth is described in Srimad Bhagavatam in the first canto, right? Second chapter, 11th verse, right? It's mentioned, right? That vadanti tat tattva vidas tattvam yajnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti saptaye. The three aspects of absolute truth can be understood in three different levels. As Bhagavan, as the personal feature of the Lord, who is the source of everything. It expansion as Paramatma, the super soul, the localized aspect of God, who is in the heart of all living entities, the witness to their activities, and guides them towards the supreme destination. This is the second aspect of absolute truth. The third is called Brahman, the impersonal Brahman, which is simply the effulgence of God, right? God is actually a person. He is the Adi Purusha, the original person. Right? Example of, right, the sunshine, sun planet, and sun god. The Acharyas gives this example, right? That if you want to understand the three aspects of God, it's like sunshine. Sunshine is also sun, but we know that sunshine is nothing but effulgence of sun. Similarly, the sun planet, when we see from here the two-dimensional disk, that is sun. But the third aspect of sun is the controller within the sun, Surya Dev, Surya Narayan. Right? He is the controller through which all the activities in sun is controlled. That we cannot see from here. Right? The scientists might understand the sunshine and the sun planet, but they do not understand the controller behind the sun planet, the activities in the sun planet. Right? Similarly, Brahman is like sunshine, Paramatma is like sun planet, Bhagavan is like the sun god. The conception of impersonal Brahman is the preliminary understanding of the absolute truth. And Paramatma is the one when he advances in the study of God, he can understand Paramatma, who is situated in everyone's heart. Finally, one can understand Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of God, Lord Sri Krishna, who is the source of both Brahman and Paramatma. Right? Krishna mentions this. Bhagunam Janmanam Ante, Jnanavan Mam Prapatyante, Vasudeva Sarvamiti, Samakatma Sudarlabhaga. After many, many births, a person who is in knowledge surrenders unto me, understanding that I am the cause of all causes. Everything exists because of me. Vasudeva Sarvamiti. Right? One who understands only Brahman will not be able to understand the other aspects. One who thinks that absolute truth means only the impersonal aspect of God, he will not be able to understand Paramatma and Bhagavan. Whereas one who understands Bhagavan, he can understand both the impersonal and personal aspect of God. Right? God is impersonal. This is what the impersonalist philosophers say. God is impersonal. He has no form. And they say that God is unlimited. If he has to have form, then he should be limited. Then he cannot have form. This is the argument the impersonal philosophers say. Right? But the truth is different. Right? The truth, however, is that to say that God cannot have form is to limit him. When we say God is formless, he doesn't have form, that means we are depriving God of something. We are saying that God does not have something. God is formless means he doesn't have form. How can have God not have something? God means he is full, he is complete. He possesses both. He is simultaneously both form and formless. If he is truly unlimited, then he must have everything, including form. We have form. So how can God, who is the creator, the source of all of us, cannot have form? How can the part have something that is not there in the whole? Because God is complete and whole, therefore he must have everything that his parts have and more. Right? Air is formless. Right? Krishna says air, right? Bhumi rapo analo vayo kammano buddhi revacha akankara itiyame binna prakriti ashtada. When he describes the material nature, he says that these 5 Mahabhutas, earth, water, air, fire, and space, right? They are all my separated energies. So air is formless. His creation, right, is form. His byproduct is formless. And his byproduct also has form, like us. So simultaneously, God has to have both form and formless. Right? Then only he can be complete. I'm almost lost slides. In another 2 minutes, I will complete. So to deny the form of Lord as the only experience of material forms, right? Why people impersonally argue? Because they think that God's form has to be material. Hence, he cannot have form, right? They speculate that God's form, when he descends on the earth, must be also made up of matter, right? Material forms have limitations. On the other hand, by definitions, God is unlimited, therefore he cannot have form. This is the argument the impersonalist gives, right? This is their logic, but that is not the case. The conclusion is, right, their argument has a flaw in this logic, right? They assume that God's form is material. That's why they say that God is formless. God does not have material form. God has spiritual form, right? Krishna's form is Sachidananda Vigraha, right? Ishvara Parama Krishna, Sachidananda Vigraha, Anadiradir Govinda, Sarva Karana Karam. He has a pure transcendental form, full of knowledge, eternity, and bliss. Since God's form is completely spiritual and unlimited, he can expand himself simultaneously and still remain the complete whole. God is the supreme controller. Wherever there is a controller, there has to be a personality. Wherever there is energy, there has to be energizer. Wherever there is a creation, there has to be a creator, right? Wherever there is some form of governance is there, we need to know there is a personality, right? There is always a personality behind government. There is always a personality behind power station. We can say the power station is controlled by computers. Now the computers are controlled by programmers, right? Behind everything, there is a personality. Energy means there is an energizer behind. Right? Ultimately, God is a person, right? God is a supreme person. Unlike us, he has a spiritual form. Satchidananda Vigraha. Our body is made up of matter. God's body is made up of spirituality. Right? So this is the conclusion. So far today we covered the common theistic arguments against God, logic to believe in the existence of God, the wrong conceptions people have about God, definition of God, right? And who is God, the expansions of God, the symptoms of an avatar, God is one or many, and then is Lord Krishna a Hindu conception of God, he is universal God, and then God's highest conception, and then why there are different religions, and then what does a true religion teach, and then is God a person? These are the different topics we covered. That comes to conclusions on today's session. Sorry, I went a little over because it's a long topic, because this is the most amount of knowledge in Bhagavad Gita is quoted about this topic in Bhagavad Gita. But I quoted very few verses on this theme. The whole Bhagavad Gita, most of the Bhagavad Gita knowledge is about God, actually, substantial portion. So it will take usually more than one session, but I try to compress this in one session so that next topic we will talk about living entity, Jiva Tattva, Ishvara Tattva we saw today, Jiva Tattva we will see next week. And then the week after that we will see Prakriti and Kala and Karma. So after that we'll start the verse by verse study of Gita in a systematic. During those systematic study, then we will talk about God from more different angles, from more different perspectives, what Krishna explains. When we study and understand this with an open mind, with clarity, we will come to a conclusion that Bhagavad Gita is not a religious scriptures. Bhagavad Gita is a very scientific book to realize God. It gives a scientific process to realize God. It is not some sentimental, whimsical emotion. It is a scientific, it's science of God. How to realize ourselves, how to realize God, how to realize the relationship with God. These are all scientifically explained in Bhagavad Gita. Once we understand that it is scientifically explained, then we will know that it is not sectarian. It does not just belong to Hindus. It does not belong to certain group of people or country, like people claim. Anybody, you can be a Muslim, still follow Bhagavad Gita and appreciate Bhagavad Gita, because it is talking about the same God. You can be a Christian, still you can appreciate Bhagavad Gita. You can be a Hindu, you can be an atheist. You'll come to a conclusion that there is a science behind God. It is not some whimsical thing, Okay, we will come to the conclusion today. Thank you very much for taking the time and attending this session. So sorry I went a little long today because it's a long topic. If anybody has any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, you can ask me in the beginning of next session also, or send me a WhatsApp message if you have any questions. Thank you very much. Any questions, any discussions, comments? You can unmute and speak. If not, we'll come to a stop. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.